Hi, my name is Lorne Brown. I'm a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine. My practice is in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. It's called AcuBalance Wellness Center. Our website's acubalance.ca. I'm also the founder of healthyseminars.com. And today I'm getting to talk with John Hubacher. And I'm really excited because John and I have met have had many discussions over several years. My first introduction to John was Pantheon. I use his electrical acupuncture devices in my clinic. And then just being at conferences, we would sit and chat and talk, and we would geek out about acupuncture, geek out about the phantom leaf experiments, which I learned as we were discussing that you were a part of that, which was exciting for me to learn, talking about laser therapy, low-level laser therapy. And every time we get together, it's just exciting. And I'm like, we got to get this out to more people. And so today we're going to chat. We're going to talk about acupuncture meridians. How does science demystify this in modern time? And we may even get into this whole quantum physics stuff, which is often we get into that discussion. John, I thought it'd be great if you could give a background. And I know you as being quite modest in the sense that you like to underplay your experience and your contribution to research in quantum physics and the phantom leaf. But I really want the people that are listening to basically create awareness about what's going on this paradigm shift, this reductionist model to there's something greater. Like we're really today in a place where we are seeing a shift. There is an evolution and a revolution in science, in medicine, and it's exciting times. And I think the more people that know it, hopefully the easier transition. And for people to receive what you have to say, sometimes the credibility factor happens. So can you please really share and brag and tell us what you've been doing over your history? And let's start with that. So give us a little background, some of the research you've been doing, and I'll stop talking so we can start listening to you.
You're doing great. Thank you, Lorne, and it's a great pleasure to be here. And I was a graduate student long ago in the 1970s at UCLA, and I was interested in psychology. We had at that time a parapsychology lab at UCLA, and I happened to be in at the laboratory. We were being introduced to many things that we're still looking at today that are considered cutting edge. In those days, parapsychology needed a manner of explaining the phenomena that we would find in that genre of science: telepathy, healing, clairvoyance, psychokinesis. These kinds of cutting edge science in the 70s needed some kind of model explanation. And Dr. Thelma Moss, whom I was a student under, had the opportunity to go to the Soviet Union and visit people who introduced her to the technique of Kirlian Photography, which is a means of looking at ostensibly energy fields around living things using electrical currents, electrical photographs. And we brought that back, and we were one of the first labs in the United States, in the Western Hemisphere, to start to look at this thing called Kirlian Photography. And we were able to associate it very quickly. At that time, acupuncture was also being introduced in the United States and the Western Hemisphere. Richard Nixon had discovered China. People had gone back there and had learned about it. And we actually had some of the very first people in acupuncture visit our laboratory, and we started doing some experiments to show that it related to the phenomena of Kirlian photography, which brought the whole discussion of acupuncture into the field of it, into the inquiry: is it some sort of energy field that we're looking at? In those days, people were saying that acupuncture was chi energy, and there was the yin-yang phenomena, et cetera, Eastern philosophy. And so we published 20 papers on this. I was able to, eventually, I left the lab. I developed an electronics business. I've developed equipment now used in electroacupuncture. We're the only company, Pantheon Research, in the United States that manufactures FDA-approved electroacupuncture devices. And part of my research now has to do with stem cell research. We've got published papers with people at UCLA and at Stanford, where we've currently taken electroacupuncture control points, electroacupuncture experimental points, and showed the difference in a rat model that stem cell proliferation is increased during electroacupuncture events on acupuncture points, but not so on control points. So that's an interesting type of research we do. I'm associated with looking at, in the field of electroacupuncture, kind of trying to raise the standards of research reporting. And we've recently published a paper in the journal Medical Acupuncture saying that, gosh, researchers have to report more fully the electronic aspects of electroacupuncture studies in order that they can be more standardized, and this should make the field hopefully more replicable. When somebody does a study, someone can reproduce it, therefore we can move forward with more effective protocols. That's basic science, really. So electroacupuncture and standards of research reporting are important. We're looking at that. Includes such things as dosage, things that aren't really well described in the literature. And a very fascinating field of research that we have created a team around of 7 people in the biophysics field and the quantum biology field includes the phantom leaf effect, which is, we'll be talking about that this morning. And this fascinating phenomena where we can actually, we have preliminary evidence that's very strong and very rigorous, where you can take a leaf and amputate it and cut it in half using electric fields. We get a picture of the whole leaf. And this is something that we draw a parallel to and a thread to with acupuncture, with biological fields, with quantum biology, with physics, and a whole panoply of things. And we are thinking right now, and I'd like to talk about this later on, about how the phantom leaf is a synthesis of many, many, many disciplines of biology, psychology, physics, electromagnetism, medicine, etc. And it's a grand synthesizer that we hypothesize could contribute to this paradigm shift we're seeing in medicine and everything else at this point. So those are some of the things I'm involved with.
Thank you for sharing that. And as we said, it's going to be kind of an organic discussion. Basically, as the new age quantum healers and speakers say, we're going to just go into the unknown and see what happens. We don't really have a set agenda, you and I, like, here's the questions we're going to ask. So I'm going to start off with the quantum leaf experiment and find out from you what is the relevance of this, how this is going to play out as in the paradigm shift that we're seeing, where we're going from this reductionist understanding of the world and the human body to a holistic, and there's this concept in your papers, you're calling it the biofield. People call it universal intelligence. People call it the field consciousness. I think it's the same phenomena they're talking about, just giving it different names. Here's a question that I have right off the bat to get this process started. This question in the phantom leaf experiment. So my understanding, I'd like you to go into more detail, is you take a leaf, you cut it, and then you're able to actually see the full leaf, even though with your 5 senses, without the equipment, you just see half a leaf because half the leaf is gone. But with other equipment, you can read this field and you can see that the whole leaf is there. In some of the books I've been reading and the workshops that I'm attending, there's this discussion that this world that we see with our 5 senses is more the illusion. It's actually less real, and there's a more real called the field. You're calling it possibly the biofield, which we can manifest from. We can impact our health. So using Dr. Joe Dispenza, for example, his terminology is we can use medicine to we can use matter to change matter. So take this pill, let me adjust you this way, massage you, which could take time. It's like this time and space idea. Or we can use energy to change matter, which can be instantaneous, because on this quantum level, in this field, all things are happening simultaneously. It's the holy now. Time is not linear, and so you can attract this future dimension to you now and have like a biological upgrade or manifest things. In one of the lectures, and I've been to many in the book, so I'm not sure exactly who said this, but they were quoting Einstein when they discussed this, that they used to think that the particle created the field, right? So you took a picture of an apple, and it emits a field. But later they realized that actually it's the field that's creating the object, the apple. And so when I looked at your recent paper that you shared with me, that include the phantom leaf experiment, it made me think of that, because if you get rid of part of that physical, if the field is creating the particle, the wave creates the particle, then by getting rid of part of the physical that we see with our five senses, that field would still be there. So in a long discussion here, my question is, what is your sense with this quote that people have taken with Einstein, saying actually it's the field that creates the material, it's the wave that collapses into the particle, versus the physical that is creating this electromagnetic field?
Well, perhaps we could go to a picture, and I'd like to go to picture 13 to start, please.
Okay, so we'll share that. We're just going to bring that up onto the screen, picture number 13. And for our listeners, what I wanted to do is, there's stuff out there, and I like the idea of how can we use science to demystify the mysticism? How can we use science to demystify what the sages and ancient practices of Chinese medicine, Reiki, chakra healing, hands-on healing, what can we do using science to demystify it? And so that's kind of why I'm bringing John in, is what is science sharing with us to kind of reaffirm what was said thousands of years ago, and what people experience in their own personal lives or in these CAM, complementary alternative medicine type practices?
Well, it's a very good point you're bringing up, and I don't have an answer for any of that, except to say that in a way, one picture is worth quite a few words. It's worth 20 or 30 years of theory and theorizing and measurements, etc., which is one of the beauties, I think, of this thing called the phantom leaf experiment. It immediately shows us graphically and almost intuitively information and data that is experimental, and it is scientific, therefore, about many of these things that Lorne you just talked about. Here we have a picture. This is a belief. It's in black and white. It's taken using this phenomenon called Kirlian Photography, which is none other than generating high voltage sparks introduced into the leaf in a special platform with the film in a position under the leaf. And you can see that I have labeled where the cut is on this leaf. There's a horizontal line that's labeled cut. The physical leaf is below that horizontal line. And the part of the leaf, which is about 50% above that cut line, is what we call the phantom region. And as you can see, that looks very much like the physical leaf would look. You can see the spine of the leaf, you can see the periphery of the leaf, you can see the geometry and the morphology and the shape, the dimensions and the anatomy of the leaf are clear. And if you were to magnify that and look at it closely, which we were able to do, we can look at, almost look at cellular structures. The resolution of this particular picture goes down to about 0.003 millimeters. So we can see very fine structures on this particular photograph, and we're very fortunate to have that high resolution. So one of the issues with phantom leaf experimentation was that, well, you're looking at an artifact. You cut a leaf, you got moisture at the cut, the electricity has force, it pushes out, it creates an artifact. What you're looking at isn't a phantom, it's merely an artifact. But here, when we have distinct morphology and anatomy and high precision photographs of this ostensible phantom region, all of that militates against an analysis of this as being an artifact. So we think this is good data that demonstrates with high probability that what we're looking at is truly some kind of phantom structure, not an artifact from an emission from the leaf. And so that's an important thing, looking at this from a scientific standpoint. This particular study we did, which was published in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine in 2015, described where we took about 130 samples of phantom leaves, and 96 of them came out to be high quality, easily discernible phantoms, much like this picture. And so we had a very high percentage rate of success on this. And this was a unique publication. There's nobody else in the world that has been able to achieve this level of resolution and this level of data. We have about a dozen anecdotal studies around the world of reputable scientists that have done these in the labs and on a sporadic anecdotal basis, 1Z, 2Z, but they've never really published the data. And so we've traveled all over the world. I've personally been to Kazakhstan to talk to some of the original Soviet scientists. I went there 2 years ago and to try to look at their data. So what we know is right now, this particular data published is probably the best that's available. And in order to further this science and this data collection, we have a team of 7 people in the United States and in Italy that are, right now we spent 2 years making equipment. We're going to replicate this experiment enough that it's highly rigorous and we can publish it hopefully in a mainstream scientific journal. So this becomes more scientific and less mystical, as you've mentioned. Now, if the phantom leaf is verified, which we think it will be, and verification in science means that multiple labs reproduce an experiment multiple times. That's the definition in science of a reproducible experiment that is accepted as scientific fact. And depending on how revolutionary the idea is, it can take anywhere from years to decades before people accept something as a scientific fact. So we need the quality of our data to be good here. But one of the advantages of the phantom is that everything we're talking about what we see in the phantom structure is very much in alignment with what you were talking about. We have something that looks like it could be coming from another dimension, another realm. The quantum realm, my understanding, and I am not an expert in quantum biology, try as I might, it eludes me. I don't know Schrodinger's equation and all these things, but quantum fields determine and regulate and produce other electromagnetic fields, which in turn produce the physical world. That's my understanding. So it's like the quantum world exists in this higher dimension and it ratchets down. So when things occur in the quantum physical realm, and what my understanding of this is generally right now being called the quantum vacuum, eventually percolate down to the physical plane. The phantom leaf may be a way to actually physically observe this in biological processes, and that's one of the things that's very exciting about this phantom leaf experiment. It really, really merges the quantum world with the physical world in a way that's observable using standard electrical measurement physics and techniques. So that is a very important thing. If there is indeed a new physics here, if there is indeed a way for us to understand this, the quantum leaf could be a doorway through which we can, with experimentation, get our hands on this because it's right there and we can look at it, we can hold it and study it, create tests for it. The phantom structure appears independent of the physical leaf. The question is, what's the source of this thing? I mean, what is it? How did that thing get there? Is this an emission from the leaf? Did the leaf create this? We have taken these leaves and we've taken up to 70% of the leaf and cut it off, and we still get that missing 70% showing up as the phantom. If we could go to, please, picture number, would be number 9. I wonder if we could put up picture 9 and 10 at the same time. Might that be possible? What we see here on the left is a picture of a Kirlian photograph of a leaf bud. And you can see that we have here a sort of white bluish discharge around the periphery. It looks like sparks. In the center, we have an orange appearing glow, as well as a little bit of blue white glow. That's on the left picture. That is an intact leaf bud. On the right, we have the second picture. We took chloroform, put this in a little baggie. The leaf was exposed, the bud was exposed to a little bit of chloroform for about 5 minutes. Then we took the picture, and you have a separation, unlike a bifurcation of 2 images. On the right-hand side is a predominantly white and blue image of the bud. On the left is a yellowish image. So the 2 qualities of orange and blue on the left have been bifurcated into blue and left, but separated on the right. The physical leaf, the physical bud, is actually the orange part on the lower left. On the right is what we think is the phantom that has separated itself fully from the leaf and injected itself out into space as a separate image. And we jokingly call this the out-of-the-body experience of the leaf. But it's a fascinating picture if you look at that. And it's almost as if the 2 qualities are separated, and it has, the phantom structure is completely independent here of the bud on the left. And we have a second picture. We had a second example of that. This wasn't just the only time we had seen that. We have seen that in other multiple examples. Quantum physics, Lorne, to get back to your point, quantum physics and a lot of the suppositions of quantum physics are proven. But when you talk about these things, usually they're modeled from the standpoint of the physical, they're modeled in microscopic realms or nanoscopic realms, the level of atoms, elementary particles. In the laboratory, these are studied at super cold temperatures. They're studied in time frames that are picosecond. They're very, very fast time frames when you're looking at things like elementary particles, which includes photons, electrons, tiny subatomic particles. That's the typical domain of many of the quantum phenomena.
You're talking about the domain as in the domain of very small.
Extremely. What's different here is we are hypothesizing, and we wrote that in that paper. I have a big 35-cent word. I love to toss it out. It makes me sound like I'm smart. It's called biological macroscopic coherent quantum system. So a biological macroscopic coherent quantum system is the hypothesis. And we aren't the first people to talk about this. There's a whole line, a legacy of scientists who sort of hypothesizes to become different strands of evidence. But here, we think we may have the first physical evidence of that of the quantum in the phantom leaf. It's biological, it's macroscopic, which means it's bigger than an elementary particle. It's the whole organism. It's a coherent quantum system. In quantum systems and quantum theory, they have this thing called coherency. It's like a laser light is coherent light. A flashlight is not coherent. It scatters. It has no power. So coherency implies everything is in phase. Everything is oscillating at the same rate. Everything is working together to be
in order. Everything's in order.
Exactly, in a quantum system. And so these are testable hypotheses. If we can, when we reproduce the phantom leaf on a reproducible basis on command at any time we want, we can actually test the quantum properties of the phantom leaf. Does it exhibit other quantum properties? And there are many, many, many things that we can test. One of the famous properties of quantum systems is non-locality, or where you take a photon and you separate it, and half goes over here and half goes over here, but these two will change exactly at the same time. It's called non-locality or entanglement. And it's one of the great and deep mysteries of quantum physics is how does that occur? This happens, you can have these particles hundreds of miles apart, and they will change instantaneously, which violates the principle that things can't move faster than light.
It challenges Newtonian science.
It challenges relativity. You have Newtonian, relativity, and quantum, and so it challenges Einstein and the relativity ideas that says that you can't have things moving faster than light. I mean, Einstein didn't like this concept at all, argued against it. The data later came out that this was actually something was predicted mathematically, and they found it out in the 1980s, and they've been doing it ever since. But such a thing like non-locality or entanglement is a fascinating idea. If we have this pervasive phantom structure in our bodies or in plants, or something like that, it could be that this helps to answer one of the fundamental questions of biology. How is this whole body we have organized? We have millions and billions or trillions of cells. Each one has hundreds of thousands of chemical processes happening simultaneously. How does it all get organized? How does you see somebody dancing? I watch my daughter do ballet, and she's all, how does it's so fast. It can't be the nervous system. It can't be enzymes flowing in the blood. It can't be blood system transferring signals around. There's a system of, the organizational system of the body has been a problem, and people don't have an answer for it. So if we hypothesized a quantum-based, quantum mechanical communication, electrical communication power system in the body that was instantaneous in terms of signals traveling as information back and forth, it would fit the need of biology for the kind of a system that biology is looking for. And when we look at the phantom is conducting electricity. You can see it as a structure that's conducting electric charge. Therefore, what we know about electric charge, it carries information, it carries power. If the phantom leaf is this is a quantum system, it could be conducting information non-locally from the standpoint of the whole organism being entangled amongst itself instantaneously. So it fits into one of the needs, the hypothetical needs of biology to organize the whole system.
So basically, just to get like when I hear this, part of me is like, oh my God, this is amazing. Then part of me is shut the front door idea, like, oh no, right? Because basically it's like we've been working that the world is flat. It makes sense. We got systems in place. It feels good. We can predict things. And now somebody's coming around saying, actually, the world is not flat. It's round.
It's worse than that. The world is very multidimensional. And I wanted to throw out this idea, and it's a you can start to find in the literature what we call another 35-cent word, make you think I'm smart, integrative biophysics. Integrative biophysics, if the author of this article says, well, nobody's really defined biophysics. Well, it's the physics of biology. But integrative biophysics is attempting to create a structure of the spirit, mind, body system as an integral whole that integrates with the environment, integrates with the spiritual nature of mankind from top to bottom, from the DNA and the molecules of the physical body all the way up to the mind and what's above the mind, which would be perhaps a spiritual level. And these are all hypothetical. But it's actually a fundamental problem, not only in biology, but in neurology. And there's the two fundamental questions in science and biology that are rarely dealt with and rarely answered is what is life and what is consciousness? Don't even go there, right? You're not going to see it in textbooks. You don't find it in universities.
Well, we're going there right now. We're going there right now because that was one of my questions about this idea of consciousness. So let's do it, John.
All right, baby. So the argument is, as you said, reductionist versus the opposite of reductionist. You can say it's materialism versus non-materialist. If the paradigm shift that's occurring and that the phantom leaf contributes to, phantom leaf builds on the shoulders of other giants that have come before it. The beauty of it is it's hard data that may actually demonstrate physically in our labs in a reproducible way many of these things that people have said are needed, but we don't have any data to support the fact that it's there. So the non-reductionist people in neurophysiology say there's a self, and the self creates the mind, and the mind then somehow interacts with the brain, and then we have consciousness, we have ourselves, we have our identity, we have the ability of the mind to control the body. It's called top-down theory. Reductionists say, no, consciousness is an illusion. You're just a product of, neurons firing, and you think you're a self, and you have an identity, you care about things, and all that's a bunch of crap, and it's not really happening. It's just neurons. You're just neurons in biochemistry. So the phantom leaf probably comes down on the side of the top-down theorists. If it's indeed independent of the physical body, if it's indeed a system, it looks like it's not just a glow or a heat glow or like an emanation coming off. It looks like it's an organized system. You can see the anatomy, you can see the cells, you can see all about that. And it's hanging in there by itself in space. It has all the appearance of being an organized system. If that's true, what we're looking at could be, we're at the stage, I would say, where Harvey was back in, I believe, the 1300s when he said, blood flows in the body. That's amazing. What do you mean blood flow? Yep, blood flows in the body. A basic revolutionary statement. We're at that level now with the biofield, and the phantom leaf is that level that the phantom leaf exists. It conducts electricity. It is independent of the physical body. It looks like it conducts information. It looks like it conducts power. This is a paradigm shift. The aspect of top-down theory applies not only to consciousness, but the whole issue, what is life, right? What is life in biology is a profoundly difficult question, and you go into the reductionist viewpoint, if we just take the cell apart enough, we look at the DNA, we look at the proteins, where does life start? Again, it's not happening, and so we have had the development of systems biology, we have people thinking, the whole organism is greater than the sum of its parts. What we need is data to show that there's a life force, and people had, of course, many historical ideas about this going way back in time. The problem was there's never any hard data for this, and so the biofield research now is providing data for the question, what is life? And the phantom leaf fits into that. It could be that in some way, shape, or form, this mysterious life force is, carried by the phantom structure, which used to be called the etheric body. In the Eastern traditions and many traditions, there's many anthropological traditions that describe a subtle energy body or a biofield or something like this. Maybe the Chinese described that with respect to acupuncture. We don't know, because we don't know if French mistranslated and they really weren't talking about it. So without getting into that controversy, we could be looking with the phantom leaf, we could be looking at energy channels that fit the analogy of meridians, etc. And this brings us back, of course, to acupuncture. But we can openly, I think, test hypothesis, is this related to consciousness and the life force when we start to talk about the phantom leaf?
And this idea of consciousness, so what I'm seeing now is more, I mean, it's been around for a long time, so what I'm seeing, it's probably, this is in my world and the courses and the books that I'm reading about, is again, how do you tap into this consciousness, or you are consciousness? So how do you what's the term? When you talk about this field, the biofield top down, there's meditations and techniques to help you connect to this place, which is beyond, which is faster than time, beyond speed of light. Again, I'm looking at some of the material that Joe Dispenza has been sharing from the literature that he reads and reviews, and they're looking at stuff now at EEGs and ECGs, looking at, you were talking about it earlier, this entanglement, so resonant bonding between people. I want to kind of bring this into the healing realm, because in your paper, this is one of the things they're talking about, is how can this change or impact health? And you talked about this coherence and orderly. There seems to be some type of organizing field, like it wants to be in order, it wants homeostasis. And there's ways to hopefully help support it, so you have this organizing field. This is where I think it's exciting. And to tie this in, the non-local stuff, people kind of dismiss and chuckle at people that do distance healing or surrogacy healing, right? In this form of energy medicine, which in one of the papers that you sent me, I think they call it, I don't think they call it biofield medicine. Yeah, biofield is energy medicine. And so I'm thinking the science, the quantum physics, the science can explain how and why distance healing would work. And if you believe, or there's this consciousness, this universal consciousness, then surrogacy and distance healing will work. The challenge right now is quantum physics people believe, or seems to work on the very, very small, as you said. Some of the physicists, yes, this is all true, but on the world of the very, very small. It doesn't work in our world of the big, right? And I'll share with you, because it was one of Joe Dispenza's books that I liked, where he reminds us that, okay, you're a human being, but you got organs and tissues. What are they made up of? Okay, they're made up of cells. And what are they made up of? And what are they, so it's an atom, it's a photon. And so at the end of the day, we are 99.999% space or energy, whatever you want to call it, the biofield, and only a fraction, only 0.0001% are we actually particle. So there's this idea that, yes, we can apply this quantum understanding on the level of the very big, because we are made up of it, the biofield. Does that make sense from what you are looking at and reading and researching? Well,
that's absolutely it. And one of the paradigm shifts in science is that these studies in biology, like the phantom leaf, when these are replicated and confirmed, will be a revolution also in physics, in that it will demonstrate that there's something different that physics never predicted, which is you can have these macroscopic quantum fields, as demonstrated by the phantom leaf. In biology, these are not just nanoparticle, atomic level, elementary particle fields. The entire organism we hypothesize as being a quantum field, essentially. Like you can think of the biofield or the energy body, the etheric body, or let's say the mind itself could be operating in the etheric plane, or what we call the quantum vacuum. By the way, there's a physicist at Berkeley, Muller, his name is, Muller, and he recently posted, I saw a website that he says, you know what, the ether never went away with Michelson-Morley experiment. There's a secret out among physicists, but the ether is really now called the quantum vacuum. And I love this statement. I loved it because it shows that in theoretical physics, there's an enormous amount of development still to be done, and there really is. Theoretical physics is understanding and is attempting to discover new particles, new laws, new fields. You start to look at the literature, and it's really all over the place. And so the fact that we might be discovering new fields, new particles, is in biology exactly what they're doing in innovative physics. So it's very much in alignment with the current zeitgeist. So I believe you had a question that we are physical bodies and we have a lot of empty space, and then the quantum fields are interacting with that in a manner. And how do we use that with healing?
Yeah, because I was thinking of two things. One is just people sometimes do surrogacy, where they'll treat somebody through somebody else. They do, Psych K is a form of that. It's a form of energy medicine, and which I practice. I practice emotional freedom technique. There's people that talk about heart coherence, and Bill Bankston has. I had him on at research, talking about his research, and he has a technique. And basically, there's this idea. They were like in Bill Bankston's research. They were able to charge cotton with this healing energy property, right? And then use that cotton to do healing. It goes beyond what we understand from the very physical Newtonian world of biology, and it goes a little bit beyond the theory of relativity, but it makes sense from the quantum level. So that's all I was stating is, if you look at quantum physics as a layperson, myself, the distance healing and the surrogacy healing makes sense. But some physicists say, yes, that only works in the world of very small. And when I brought up the space idea of how much space we are, we're mostly space, not actual particle, mostly energy. I was saying, well, why doesn't it, or why can't it work in the very big, considering we are mostly these small little, we're mostly energy.
It is the key. It is a very, very key point. Imagine, however, that there also, if you look into it, there's many answers for that and many models. And again, I want to reiterate that the beauty of the phantom leaf and what we're doing with biofield research is we can test these models, and as we improve our data, we have more and more true resolution of these problems. One of the factors of the biofield, if it's the etheric body and this quantum physical body, is that it should be, in theory, highly, highly sensitive to external events like electrical events, electromagnetic events, etc. And it fits in perfectly. Right now, we know that there's quantum biological processes in the olfactory system. The smell is actually a proven quantum biological process.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. This is not theoretical at all. The quantum biological processes, I believe, that are known right now include vision, olfactory sense, the magnetoreception in birds, and photosynthesis in plants. If you look at the literature, it's not controversial. Photosynthesis in plants is a quantum biological process. It involves quantum physics. It's almost 100% efficient. Transferring light energy into the energy of the plant is highly, highly efficient. It happens with the benefit of quantum physics processes. To sense and smell things, you can take the tiniest particle, like a molecule, and suddenly you got it. You can smell it. Apparently, it's quantum mechanical. It's proven. The eye can sense one photon because it's a quantum mechanical process. And birds, when they're traveling, are orienting themselves to the magnetic fields of the Earth, which is super, super weak. And they go, how did this happen? And the magnetic field of the Earth can't possibly create a physical chemical change in the nervous system of the bird. How could it be sensing the weak magnetic field? And they looked at this and they thought, the quantum mechanical processes take place to increase the sensitivity. And there's an example of this in quantum physics called tunneling. Tunneling is what happens in the sun. You have the substances of the sun, helium, under the pressure and the gravity, they merge, they tunnel into each other to produce alternate elements and create the nuclear fusion process. Tunneling occurs during photosynthesis, olfactory sensation, magnetoreception in birds, vision. Don't ask me how it is, but in terms of the statistics of how little tiny particles interact, because of the quantum process, you can take small amounts of energy and they'll perform work in a way that you wouldn't predict it from normal Newtonian physics. You add in the quantum statistical probabilities that those particles can jump through barriers or go through things that they wouldn't normally do statistically just because it's probable, and they actually do it, and then the molecule of smell hits your nose and that tunneling effect takes place, and that molecule sets off a cascade of multiple things such that it becomes something that you can actually sense by the nerves and you identify as a smell. We see this in what are called photomultiplier tubes in physics. You can take a night vision camera, night scope like the soldiers use. A little tiny, 1 photon of light hits an electronic plate and it cascades into 2 electrons, and those 2 electrons cascade into 4, 8, 16, and suddenly you have an electrical signal you can sense because it has created a cascade of amplifying signals. And this is in the biology, quantum processes regulate this thing. And so when we have a healer who's got his hands on a patient and his etheric body, which is a very weak field according to how we would sense it electronically, that is touching or communicating or interpenetrating with the patient's biofield. The patient's biofield is ultra sensitive, far sensitive than what we can currently manage. It picks that up and translates that into a signal that the body then interprets as a usable physiological signal, and it starts to regulate the physiological systems. Same thing with the mind. Let's say the mind is a field up here, or I don't know, wherever the hell it is, very weak, and it is interfacing with the biofield of the brain in a way that happens, in ultra fast, ultra sensitive, ultra quick, highly efficient, highly effective, for those of us that are thinking. These little tiny signals of the mind actually affect the neurons, and it's a model that we have. So you're right. Quantum processes are normally little tiny particles, and reductionist scientists will poo-poo it. But the processes of quantum physics means in biology, it provides many, many answers for for things that we currently don't have any explanations for. For instance, I want to bring up somebody in particular, Michael Levin, L-E-V-I-N. Mike Levin is a most remarkable researcher, and he is specifically taken off on some of the early, very beautiful research by Harold Saxton Burr, Leonard Ravitz, Bjorn Nordenstrom, Lund, a whole list of researchers, Becker.
I'm looking at the paper here. There's lots of great references there. He's got Becker, Martinez.
And he is looking at what we call bioelectricity in the body and how bioelectricity affects and regulates physiological processes.
Yeah, because he's talking about, maybe you can discuss this, because I've seen this in a couple of the papers you sent me, and I like it because of a lot of my practice on fertility. He's talking about the morphogenetic field, and then in some of the papers they shared about the whole embryonic development about this field, and so maybe we can kind of go from that point of view, because this field, this process, this morphogenic field seems to be right at the beginning. Maybe you can share then, when does life begin? Right? We can solve a dilemma here, help the Republicans and conservatives get along in your country.
Well, maybe if we can perfect the, I think that eventually, actually, with some seriousness, as our research develops, we should be able to develop ultimately some sort of video process to see the biofield. And I think parallel to that, one thing that is not sufficiently researched and should be researched and is available for researching is the human subjective ability to see the human aura or the biofield or the etheric body or the energy meridian, so to speak. There are many people that actually have, and they hide themselves in secret because they don't want to be ridiculed or something like that, but they can see these things, and it's a rich, rich source of future research. And a question like, when does the soul enter the fetus? I think it's not necessarily religious or hypothetical. I think that we'll eventually get to the point where you can actually physically see those kinds of phenomena, and it may just be able to infuse our legal system with a little more knowledge, assuming we don't ignore science. But let me read something that Harold Saxon Burr in the 30s wrote this, and get this.
This is from the 30s?
1935, Burr and Northrop. They published many papers, and they came up with the electrodynamic theory of life, 1935. The pattern of organization of any biological system is established by a complex electrodynamic field, which is in part determined by its atomic physicochemical components and which in part determines the behavior and orientation of the chemical components. This field is electrical in the physical sense, and by its properties, it relates the entities of the biological system in a characteristic pattern and is itself in part a result of those entities. So in other words, it determines the physiology and is determined by the physiology. It works back and forth, works both ways. The field determines the physiology. The field is determined by the physiology.
So there's some duality in this.
Yeah. It
sounds like, by the way, that's one of the principles of the yin-yang theory. So Chinese medicine really got it right. There's this interdependent, mutually, they look opposite, right? But they also are independent. Kind of think of like a coffee cup. You can't have the inside without the outside, right?
It's beautiful. It determines and is determined by its components. More than establishing pattern, which is morphology, or you say morphogenetic field you mentioned, it must maintain pattern in the midst of physicochemical flux. Like, this is one of the problems of biology. How does a body, with everything, how does it maintain its pattern all the time? The cells are changed every 7 years. You're totally changed. I mean, it really is a mystery, and people, oh, it's the DNA. No, it's not just the DNA.
And in one of your papers, that was one of the things that they were discussing, that genetics is not, who we are is not so much what we thought, as in it's your genes. So you're saying this, can you just clarify that? Because what we understand with genetics, it could not be keeping this homeostasis and what we're seeing in the physical body. It's beyond what that looks like from a genetic.
Yeah, if I had enough time, I could dig out specific references that do rigorously and critically discuss the fact that genetics cannot account for morphology, development, the development of an organism from a one-celled creature, one-celled egg, all the way up to the whole organism. It can't account for healing processes. Many, many things that genetics really don't account for. And one of the things that Harold Saxon Burr demonstrated experimentally, and it's still such a beautiful experiment. Even Mike Levin, with his advanced $10 million laboratory, constantly refers to Burr as having beautiful experiments. He took a frog's egg and a single cell on the frog's egg, and he found that there were voltage gradiences and different spots on this frog egg, and this would happen in any frog egg. And as the frog developed, anatomical structures and cells would align with voltage potentials on the egg. So here was a high voltage potential down the center of the egg. Suddenly that became the nervous spinal cord. This potential here became the various limbs, et cetera, et cetera. So anatomy was following the electric field, and the electric field was determining anatomy.
There is a YouTube video. I was going to search it up, but I won't. There's a YouTube video showing that, by the way. It's like 30 seconds, 45 seconds of the frog egg, and just showing how there's these electrical changes and nodes being developed ahead of the physical structure. So what I'm getting from our discussion is...
let me interrupt, because that's the specific research data point that demonstrates it's not the genetic material that's causing the morphology and the developmental morphology of the organism. It's the electric field. Electric field is primary to the genetics.
So it goes back to, or I think it relates to that earlier statement where it's not the particle that creates the field, it's the field that creates the particle.
Well, on the frog, when we were talking about the frog egg, we're talking about a macroscopic system. You're referring to an atomic system, and as my understanding of quantum physics is that's still correct on the atomic level. What the hell is an electron? Excuse me, what the heck is an electron? What's an atom? It starts to be, is it a particle or a wave? And the whole thing starts to get impossible to determine. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and all that kind of stuff. You can't actually say if an elementary particle is either a hard particle or a wave. It's both, depending on how you measure it. And it gets into the nitty-gritty of exactly what this question is. So the field does determine the particle on an atomic level, and the fields can determine organization and physiological regulation for the whole organism. And this also brings us back to acupuncture, is that acupuncture is, yes, determined by neurophysiological response mechanisms, biochemical response mechanisms. Those things are valid, and it's of course excellent that Western science is integrating that with its knowledge. I think we have to remember that as we do acupuncture and do healing with acupuncture as a system, one thing that's often ignored is that we're probably also manipulating the bioelectric fields that Mike Levin talks about and Harold Saxon Burr talked about, because as we change those electric fields in the meridians or the channels, we are regulating body physiology of all types. And that's one of the things that is, I want to say it's less researched in acupuncture. It's less understood. The research is quite pilot. It has great potential, but I think that also is it goes along with the phantom leaf model. That here you can see these channels taking place, and they're carrying electricity, and these are determining the physical structure of the leaf. The physical leaf didn't create the phantom leaf. We think the phantom leaf creates the leaf. The phantom is creating the physical leaf. And so it could be that the meridians of the body, or let's call them energy channels, are doing also just that on a macroscopic level.
And I think I know our colleague Michael Corradino, he does a lot of the neuroacupuncture courses on healthyseminars.com. He talks about this meridian, and he believes, and I've heard other people, that's a mistranslation. And they like the idea of channels versus meridians, not so much like the Earth, longitudinal, latitudinal, but more like channels. I don't know if that makes a difference, but sometimes the term you give something can affect the understanding of it. Can you go into, because earlier when we were chatting, part of our discussion today with your phantom leaf experiment and the research that you're involved in, there's a lot of skeptics. Do acupuncture points exist? Do these channels exist? Can this actually work? And a lot of the skeptics are coming from the reductionist system, which seems very real. There's lots of evidence to reaffirm it works. However, it's kind of like the world is flat. So with the model thinking the world is flat, you can drive and do a lot of things, even though it's wrong, the world is not flat. You can make a lot of things work based on that understanding. In one of the papers, biology hasn't gone through that revolution that physics has in the past 100 years. So not coming so much from the reductionists, because these skeptics are coming from a model that actually may be, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm saying it's incomplete. So their model is incomplete, the model that they're coming from. So using a more complete model that includes both the reductionist model and also this understanding of the quantum level or this quantum vacuum, can you add any support, evidence to reaffirm, are there acupuncture points? Is there a possibility? Are there channels? And you can even tie this into the electrical acupuncture research that you've been looking at for stem cell proliferation. Is it doing something? And if so, how is it doing it? Because a lot of the stuff was based on opioid and endorphin release or how it affects the nervous system. But if we're saying the field is creating the physical in a sense here, then if we're tapping into the biofield, maybe there's a whole other thing that's happening here that we're not measuring or looking at carefully enough. Did that question make sense, or did I mess that up?
I think it's spot on and it's perfect. And what you look at is what you're going to discover. And if you look at the research on is there an acupuncture point and is there an acupuncture meridian, the critics, and I believe I sent you a paper by Dr. Levin, who was
yes,
a wonderful paper she wrote on that.
Yeah, her paper's called, and we'll put this up as well. So we're live here, but during the recording, we'll put up.
And it's
what is the point? Her paper is, what is the point? The problem with acupuncture research that no one wants to talk about, and it's Helene Langvin, MD, and Peter Wayne, PhD.
Yeah, exactly. And so I would say in response to the questions, is there an acupuncture point? Is there an acupuncture meridian? And then the reductionist hardcore model would say, I believe they say something like, there is no evidence to date that acupuncture points exist or meridians, unquote. And I would say that's not, I don't think the data supports that conclusion. That's as if you could say that Newton would say there's no data whatsoever that relativity exists. Well, that's a true statement. This isn't the way science works. There's 60 published papers right now that I can last determine on people trying to find meridians published in acupuncture journals alone. Bear in mind, I think Mike Levin, Harold Saxton Burr, Bjorn Nordenstrom, Robert Becker, Herbert Froelich, and a whole list of people have hard data to demonstrate that acupuncture meridians exist. They're just not appearing in the acupuncture journals. The journals of biophysics, and I should send you another paper, there's the most beautiful paper written by Marco Bischoff. It's called Introduction to Integrative Biophysics. It goes through the whole history of the biofield research. It blows your mind, the volumes of research that have come out to demonstrate the validity of the biofield concept and how it integrates with physics. And I think this stuff is by and large not available to the acupuncture community or the medical community, and so they tend to look with a narrow view. 60 published papers trying to determine is there electrical parameters that would confirm and identify an acupuncture point or an acupuncture meridian. Vast majority of those papers, when you look at the review articles, for instance by On and others that have recently published review articles, say that the research hasn't been done well, and they either weren't double blind, or they weren't blinded, or the end was insufficient, or perhaps the instrumentation, you could point to how the instrumentation was faulty. When you're measuring bioelectric signals on the skin, you have to take into account certain control parameters, and maybe the experimenters didn't do that. So you can start to critique the experimental methodology, and they're valid criticisms. It does, but people did find a lot of circumstantial and pilot evidence that strongly indicates that there is something taking place with the meridian or the acupuncture point phenomena as measured electrically. And so I would say to those people who had critical review articles, you could say there's no confirmation, and that's true, but you could also say there's very strong pilot evidence. All you have to do is produce good methodological research, and you're probably going to open up the doors to this more. On top of that, it's not just electrical measurement systems, but people have looked at many types of means to measure acupuncture points and channels, including the transmission of light through the channels, the transmission of sound through the channels, and those are positive studies. They've looked at radiographic detection, like putting radioactive substances in the channels, and there's been a certain amount of that movement you can see. Infrared images, thyrography. You can see the channels using heat imaging, infrared cameras, for instance. And there's something I'm recently looking into, which is, if anybody out there wants to try to look up a burgeoning field, it's called plant electrophysiology, believe it or not. They are finding that plants are rock and rolling from the standpoint of electrical signals. There's a lot of very good research showing that plants have a fantastic system of electrical communication in them. We've been looking at that. It's like, I can't believe this stuff.
Okay.
It's amazing.
I got to ask you something because you know I always have my skeptical brain here. So we're talking about quantum physics, now we're talking about the plants. You know what comes to mind? I'm like, are you serious? So the Avenger movies is all about quantum physics. Endgame and Infinity Wars, right? Ant-Man, if you ever watch that, they're all discussing quantum physics. And now you're talking about the plants. It makes me think of that movie Avatar that came out a couple of years ago where the plants were all communicating. So how is Hollywood ahead of the game here? How do they know about this? Because they had to plan that 5-10 years ago.
Well, it's not just Hollywood. If you look at, when I was in parapsychology, we used to look at fiction books and how Jules Verne predicted that the first moonshot would take place, and he wrote in the mid 1800s, and the location of the moonshot was on the eastern seaboard of Florida, you know, right where almost exactly where Cape Canaveral is, etc. If you if you look at, there's a whole bunch of studies that show people who wrote fiction predicted the future, but I won't get into that.
That's where we get into the one mind and that there is no real linear time, I guess, right? And you're tapping into something, some say. I want to talk a little bit more about the acupuncture, though, and some of the questions here I'm just looking at here. Are there any medical implications of proving the existence of the human biofield as being identical to acupuncture channels?
Medical implications are profound. And the biofield studies, which I think are largely ignored by people who look for the physiology of acupuncture, I think that the two disciplines really have to come together. As we prove the existence of the biofield, we have to ask ourselves: Are we proving the concept of meridians? And I know that the meridian concept is controversial from the standpoint of maybe it wasn't originally described that way by the Chinese, and Europeans mistranslated it, and that whole, I haven't followed that through all the way. I don't know if I can, but there certainly were many cultures. Nadis is a deep concept in Indian literature. Pranas are a deep concept in Indian literature, and not to mention the esoteric traditions. Alice Bailey has volumes of explicit and specific material dealing with the etheric body and what we call the biofield, and what it does and how it regulates the body systems and the mental systems, etc. And ultimately, I think we can prove that the complexity of the biofield is highly complex. There could be many different types of quantum fields that are undiscovered, many different types of elementary particles that are undiscovered. And these things do enhance and will amplify physics and biology. So the medical implications of proving the existence of the human biofield are really quite enormous. And it takes us away from the materialism and the reductionism that medicine currently focuses on, the physical body and the pharmacological aspects of healing. It paradigm shifts the entire thing. And it could be that in 50 years, the science of acupuncture and the science of the biofield and the science of electrical healing, right now we're at the stage where Harvey was when he said blood flows. That's the stage we're at, and it's probably going to explode in the starting today, next 50 years. So,
and the internet will help that, because back in Harvey's day, they didn't have the ability for information to be distributed so quickly and so greatly, whereas now it's so much easier. I want to know if you have any books you like to recommend. For example, I'm going to give you a chance to think about it. I'm going to share, like, these are the books that I've enjoyed reading from a layman's person's perspective. Because, John, you're not a lay person. I'm listening. I'm enjoying our conversation. I'm getting some of it. Some of it definitely I'm not, because I don't have your brain and experience. So the books that I've enjoyed, in no particular order, Jill Blakeway has one called Energy Medicine. Joe Dispenza, I like both, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself and Being Supernatural. Lynn McTaggart has The Field and The Power of Eight, or to name a few. Bruce Limpton, The Biology of Belief. I mean, he's one of the earlier ones that I believe, where he talked about epigenetics, and it wasn't your genes, but the expression of genes, and how the environment and the the environment, not the gene, but the environment that determines the expression. And he talked about how your emotions and thoughts are that, not just your, the chemical environment. He's talking like the emotions and your thoughts can impact DNA and gene expression. So those are some of the books I've been reading that I found profound. Bill Bankston on his website has workshops and papers, similar to the ones that you sent to me. So if you're interested in looking into this biofield, those are some of the books and places to go. Do you have any recommendations, books or sites that you have found quite interesting? And again, for the listeners, John here is one of the people that publishes this stuff. So we have his paper that he published about the phantom leaf experiment, and he contributes a lot. So you're not a lay person, but I'm curious to know if you have any books you'd like to recommend.
I would, if a person wants to sort of dig into the biofield, and if you're an acupuncturist and you want to see, expand your horizons for the literature, on the web in PDF form, they put out this most marvelous chapter by Marco Bischoff, Bischhof. It's called Introduction to Integrative Biophysics. Introduction to Integrative Biophysics. It's on the web. It's a PDF. It's free. He has I don't know, hundreds of references, but he goes into the history of biofield research, the concept, the data, how it integrates with modern physiology, and now it's how it's integrating with quantum physics, and this thing called integrative biophysics, which is he's trying to bring science to describe the integration between the spirit, the mind, and the body. It's the most marvelous academic paper, one of the best I've ever read. So I would recommend that people might want to take a look at that. It's challenging, but if you sit with it, and I go to sleep at night reading it, trying to understand it, you can really get the depth of the history. And most of it it's available, and it's like unknown. So I would actually be excited if people dug into that particular chapter.
Thank you. That would be a good start. It just gave me another thought, another question. You talked about coherence. In some of the papers, they talked about the microtubules and photons and affecting this organizational behavior. You have developed lasers. You've worked with lasers. How does lasers work in this healing property and the electromagnetic field and cascade of events it creates? Can you talk a little bit about, since we're on the biofield and we're talking about energy medicine, which lasers are energy medicine, now we're talking photons. What's your thoughts, and maybe this is digressing too much, but using low-level laser, infrared light, and coherent light, so laser therapy, to help organize the body and to help with healing, and why does it work?
It's great. Thank goodness there's an enormous amount of really hard, solid data on lasers, and it's growing all the time. And so it's being very firmly rooted in scientific principles and Western traditions of science and publication. It's an exploding field. I think it's a wonderful field. And I know that there's conventional models to show that different frequencies of laser do affect different tissues and molecules and cell membranes, and that there's biochemical cascades that occur that are identified. And I think that it's going to explode. I mean, lasers are marvelous tools, and we're just learning how to use those. I think that there's a very interesting interaction that occurs with the biofield, which I wanted to bring up briefly. It's a little bit of a diversion, but there's some studies done by a gentleman named Garyayev and Paponin from Russia. They had an experiment, and they kind of paralleled our work with the phantom leaf, but they call it the phantom DNA effect. And using lasers, a particular type of a spectroscopy, with a very tiny little laser, you would irradiate a DNA sample, and it would scatter the laser beam, and then they would analyze that scattered light beam for qualities of the DNA. And it's a standard and sophisticated DNA analysis technique. And they discovered that when they would, on occasion, remove the DNA sample, they would still get the light scattering as if the DNA sample were there. And that this would persist for long periods of time. They called it the DNA phantom effect, as if the energy, the biofield of the DNA was still there, and they were able to analyze it, and it scattered the light beam, it scattered the laser beam. And their discussion of this is back in the 1990s. Their discussion of that very much paralleled our discussion of the phantom leaf, unbeknownst to us, but there was a quantum effect and indicated that they were measuring the quantum vacuum and all these kinds of things. But it could be that lasers are able to interact with the biofield as light in their own particular and peculiar way. And so we don't know much about that. But as electricity seems to interact with the biofield, light and lasers probably also interact with the biofield, as does sound, as does thought, as do magnetic fields. And so the biofields are these very sophisticated things that interact with the physical world in many ways. Lasers are one of them. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my attempt.
Good. Well, thank you regardless. No, I know you're using the lasers, and it made me think of lasers versus LEDs. They're not coherent. Lasers are. So, and they're both popular. You know, you can use the same wavelength, but again, one's coherent, not. So I wonder, should we only be using lasers, since when you talk about the research biofield, there's so much about coherent energy, right? And with coherent thought, it just seems coherent seems to be really key. And so I had thoughts on that. It's all hypothetical, theoretical. Like, I geek out sometimes too and just think about these things, right? So, yes.
I wonder if you could pick up picture number 3.
So we'll go to picture number 3. And what are we seeing with picture number 3?
I know we haven't been talking about anything that's way out there, so I thought I'd go way out there a little bit.
All right, we're ready. Are we going to talk about aliens?
Well, not in this slide. This is a really unusual set of data, and I'm happy to try to share this, but it shows the possibility of this research, I think, that people need to look at and really be open about. And it has implications for everything we've been talking about. This is a Kirlian photograph of an index finger. And you can see that the basic picture of the finger is blue, and it's circular there, sort of on the bottom. And then you have a blue structure that shoots off and curves to the right and then goes up with an angle. Well, let me briefly describe how that took place. We had a subject in our laboratory, and we were taking his picture, and he said, if you send to me telepathically a symbol or a number, I'm going to transmit it down to the picture, and it's going to come out in the Kirlian photograph. Okay, let's try it. So we had somebody who went downstairs, wrote on a piece of paper the number 5, sent it up, thought transference to this person, and he said, okay, I'm getting it, take the picture, and we did. And then this came out. And if you look at this, if you were to put a bar on the 5 on top, it would actually look like a 5 reversed. Can you see that?
Is that your mouse, or is that Lorraine? Lorraine, can we see the mouse on there? Because I want to see where he's seeing the 5. So you're saying, here's a mouse. Where do you want us to go with that mouse? Top right? Annotation. Annotate.
Oh, cool. There we go. Oh, very cool. Yeah. Go up there. Now go to the left. There we go. Now, if you flip it over, it's a 5.
See it now. Okay, now we can, hold on, I want to see if we can flip it around. Can we flip this? No.
Sometimes you can do it, yeah.
I can't flip it, but I get it now. So you're saying, I see the 5. You put a mirror there, and you got it. It's 5, yes.
So what happened here? Someone went downstairs. They sent a telepathic signal to this gentleman, and it came out of their finger, and the electricity in the Kirlian photograph made it appear.
Okay, now, do you have other examples? Because to me, that's a big stretch to say that's a 5.
Let me look at, if you could please put up picture number 7.
Like, I mean, somebody could say there's a heart there, right? So you're going to have to do more for me, John, than that. But I'm open and I want to believe, but I need you to give me a little bit more than that.
No, I don't want you to believe. Do not believe this.
Like I say, I'm open, so I want to do this, but and I know you're a scientist, so we're going to get some more here. So, okay, let's look at this picture.
Okay, so these are, for instance, where we have the left half of this picture, you have 2 circular pictures. Those are the index fingers of the same subject, baseline pictures, and on the bottom is him doing that with the symbol 0. On the right is labeled 2. You have 2 baseline pictures on top of the Kirlian photos, and on the bottom you have him, and the symbol that was transferred to him was a triangle.
Okay, I see that.
You see that, right?
That's
and
obvious.
I
Triangle.
showed you 5, and we also had a, trying to think of the other symbol. We did it a couple of other times. Let me, if you could put up, please, picture number 8.
Yeah. There's the triangle in the bottom right. So
yeah, there we go.
So, and explain what's happening here. So this is his index finger you're taking a picture of still?
Yes.
So somebody's in another room, another space, they're thinking triangle, and their intention is triangle to the other gentleman. And what's his index finger have to do with this? You're taking a picture of his finger, and in the finger you're seeing the triangle.
Well, to put it all together, he picked up a thought unconsciously. Mm-hmm. That somehow was transferred as a symbol. That symbol or that thought unconsciously modified his biofield projected out of his finger, which we picked up with the electricity.
Okay.
It's a very long string. And
what's the pick you want? We would need to figure out the pick again. What pick do you want, number?
Yes, please, number 8.
Number 8. You know, this is in line with, I have a lovely teacher of consciousness, Gila Golub here locally in Vancouver, and she always asks, what are you emitting into the field? Like your thoughts affect the field and affect how the environment gets reflected back to you. And so this is a big part of her teaching about being conscious, being present, and being very conscious of what you're putting out there into this biofield, because you're impacting the biofield with your thinking. And then I don't remember Greg Braden or groups of people, Heart Math, where they've gotten people together to get into heart coherence, to get really centered, present, to bring up emotions of a compassion or joy. I don't know exactly how they did it. I apologize if I'm not to the detail of how they did it, but they were measuring things on the planet Earth, and they were showing how there was less war, more peace, and they were seeing shifts in the planet for certain electromagnetic fields. That's the big picture idea of it, which goes back to that what you're putting out there is being picked up by other people.
Well, exactly. And I mean, what I'm showing you is an experiment that requires you to stretch in 3 or 4 directions. You have to accept telepathy, you have to accept that the mind is picking it up, and then it's transferred to a biofield. So there's 2 or 3 unknowns in this particular kind of an experiment. It's a very difficult thing to get your head around. But exactly, our thoughts are real things, and they're even so real that they can create patterns in a biofield, and you can actually measure it using electromagnetic measuring equipment. Depending on how you do it, it looks like on occasion you can actually do that. This particular, I'm going to talk about psychokinesis. This was a gentleman who was able to, for instance, fix watches. You take a broken watch, and he would hold it, think about it, and the watch would start up. And this was done dozens of times. It appeared to be real. A lot of this was published way back in the 70s. And this is on number 3 here on the left. There's the watch band on the upper right. There's the face of the watch on the left. On the bottom is his fingertip, and that's a baseline picture. Number 4, we said, well, if you can fix watches, send energy to the watch, and we'll take the Kirlian photo. And he did, and then this pattern emerged from his index finger and shot up towards the watch. It's going about 1 inch to 1.5 inches up. So the question becomes, is that his bioenergy field shooting up out of his finger? And that's the energy that would therefore interact with the watch and then cause the watch to be fixed. Is this a kind of energy of psychokinesis? And so we were looking at, and people have wondered, how do parapsychological phenomena take place? Do people, when they do healing or psychokinesis or telepathy, are they projecting their biofield out, which contains information, somebody picks it up, and that's interpreted as a telepathic event? So we're trying to model in terms of physics how a parapsychological phenomenon might occur. So we don't have any conclusions. These things would have to be replicated hundreds of times. These people that can do this are uncommon. Nobody's trying this. But I just wanted to show you that it's a fascinating example of how unusual the biofield might really be. I want to go to if you could show me picture 2, please, and I'm going to bring this into acupuncture.
Okay. Number 2.
This is a fingertip of that same person shooting some energy out towards a watch. And if you look at the periphery of the finger before the electrical spark occurs, like maybe right in the center there, you go now go up a little bit, up, right there. You can see that that energy almost appears to be emitting from a point in the tip of the finger. Looks like a kind of a smoky pattern at some point. Right down there, exactly right there, where the finger, the edge of the finger is. Up a little more. That's it, right there. That looks like a little smoky. It's almost like you can see a current or a smoky current. It, to me, brings up the question, is that energy that he was emitting being emitted from the acupuncture point that's supposed to be at the tip of the finger? So this might be an example of that the acupuncture points actually are integrated with the biofield system, and that they're points of emission, and that this is emitting the biofield. The biofield actually is solid enough that electricity can be conducted through it. So these are very interesting questions from some of the pilot data we have that people have to look at hopefully in the future. Fascinating kinds of data, very way out.
Do you have other pictures that we should review? Because you gave us a couple, and I'm finding this really interesting. So do you have any visuals you want us to look at?
Okay, let's go to picture 1. This is a picture of just nobody with special abilities, and yet what we see, this is an index finger again, and you see this odd electrical pattern formation going up at a diagonal there. And so we sort of think these are like plasma emissions from the fingertip. And now this gives credence and gives integrity to the previous pictures I showed you that looked like energy emissions from the fingers that were taken on symbolic shapes. On occasion, regular people do show up these plasma-style emissions, and this occurred in our lab at UCLA. It also, however, occurred in the laboratory of Dumitrescu in Romania, and he published that in his book. It occurred in the lab of Ilyushin in Russia, and he published that in multiple papers. And also occurred as a well-known researcher, Elmer Green, Colorado, also had examples of this that he demonstrated at conferences. So the plasma emission photograph that shows this odd picture showing up is important for 2 things. Number 1, people say, oh, the Kirlian photograph is just electrical discharge, it's only a spark. If it's only a spark and it doesn't show anything, these unusual photographs like the phantom leaf, like the plasma emissions like this, like the symbols that come out, the triangles, etc., couldn't be formed. There must be something else being photographed other than sparks. And we think that the sparks interact with the biofield, and the sparks show the shape of the biofield. And so this is an example of just a person. These are commonly found in people. There's these weird energy emissions that do take place, and people say, well, how does healing occur? It could be that a little particle of this energy emission goes into the patient's biofield and causes their whole system to change, because being a quantum mechanical system, one photon can cause the visual field to change. One molecule can cause you to smell. A tiny magnetic field can cause the bird to orient in the magnetic field of the Earth. So a tiny bit of information like this extending into space can actually cause healing in a patient. So these are all hypothetical things that are modeled in quantum mechanics, and they're things we're observing. Let's take a look at picture number 6, please. Now, this is an index finger. It's got a halo around it. You think, wow, that's kind of a Kirlian photograph. We took this picture without any electricity. This is done simply by placing your finger on black and white film while the film was in the developing solution. Very weird. Gets clammy. It smells. You got your fingers in the developing solution for 5 minutes. But we get a picture like this, and it looks very much like, the emanation of light of some sort being photographed from the fingertip. So we're trying to continue with this, and we think there may be ways to detect the biofield that get us away from using the electricity of the Kirlian photograph, but we can just detect it like this. And so we're moving forward in technology to try to demonstrate, better means of actually detecting the biofield.
Now, what's the significance of it being done through using electricity versus this chemical soup? Why is it? Because I'm not clear on why I should be excited about that, because you seem to find this very important. And is it flashing for you? Because it's flashing for me.
It is flashing.
It's so it's also part of the biofield. Like, why is this one flashing and the rest aren't? It's maybe they were communicating something to us in what Morse code, whatever that's called. All right. So can you go back to explain the difference between how you measure this biofield and the significance of one way versus the other?
The significance of this is that, number one, the critics say, oh, the Kirlian photograph is just the electricity, there's no biofield. So here we have a very similar type of picture, very analogous, and it's not done with the electricity. So it's more evidence that supports the existence of the biofield concept. Without the electricity, it's an analog using a different technique that shows the same result. Therefore, it gives support to the idea of the biofield looking like this in the first place.
Okay.
Number two is, if we can get into why this occurs, we might be able to generate, for instance, a video camera that can pick this up rather than a still film. So we get into the theory of the physics and all this stuff. Maybe there's something in there that opens us up to a whole new way of looking at it that's kind of cool. And let's see, I believe I'd like to give, there were some pictures I sent yesterday, not in this group. I think it was pictures 19 and 20. One was called Kirlian Photograph of Colitis.
We'll see if we have that picture. Thanks. John, I've known you for many years, and I'm learning so much. I didn't know some of the stuff that you were doing. I knew you were doing stuff, and we talked, but to this detail. So, you don't know sometimes what your friends are up to, eh?
Even my wife doesn't know.
I didn't feed you enough beer the last time we were out on the patio to get you talking about this.
It's a weird world out there in many ways. When you start looking at these biofield ideas, it's like, wow, it is a whole new paradigm shift in many ways. And okay, thank you very much. These are Kirlian photographs of the fingertips. On the left is the left hand, and on the right is the right hand. There is a missing finger in the upper right in the left-hand quadrant. Yes, right. Thanks very much. That's the index finger of the left hand of this particular patient. He reported colitis, and many of the people that reported such an ailment in the intestinal tract had the index finger affected abnormally. In this case, the index finger, we had an absence of a picture on the index finger, which in real general terms, there's no energy in the colon meridian.
Right. So for the general public, the colon or large intestine channel, it runs through the index finger and it goes up through into the colon. Exactly.
So we published a paper, and I published that with the late Deke Kendall, great friend of mine.
Yeah.
Deke was prominent in showing the relationship between acupuncture and physiology. Basically speaking, we were very clear. We were able to closely correlate traditional Chinese medicine theory with respect to channels and meridians with the appearances of the Kirlian photographs. When a meridian like this wouldn't show up on the finger, it would often relate to an internal organ problem that related that meridian. The next picture would be the thumbs missing, which because the person had a chest cold. And so in the next picture, we have missing thumbs. That's it. And you can go up a little and you can see that. Yeah, we have on the left side here, the left hand, and where the arrow is a missing thumb. And on the right side of the photograph I'm showing you, there's an arrow, and that's pointing to a missing.
And again, for some of those that aren't acupuncturists, hand-tie-in, or the lung channel, I should say. The lung channel runs through the thumb.
Yep, exactly. So, chest cold, lung problem, the thumbs would not photograph. Correlation, we think, with TCM theory. So, what's the relevance of this? Number one is a potential diagnostic tool here. Number two, we seem to have we have a possible method of validating the notion of channels or meridians, as indicated by the high voltage photographs, the Kirlian photographs. And these things, so we think this is an important observation. This hasn't been followed up on. Like much research doesn't get followed up on, and it could. So we had another experiment we did, which I very much want to follow up on, but we would take a laser beam, like Lorne, you're talking about laser beam, we took a 5 milliwatt red laser, put it on the base of the nose, on the large intestine point here at the base of the nose. I did the Kirlian photographs of the hand. Just the index finger would react when we did that.
Really? So again, for the listener, the large intestine, this channel starts on the index finger, and it works its way all the way up colon, and it ends on the opposite side, large intestine 20. That's the end point, and then there's divergent channels. But so the two ends, and sometimes in Chinese medicine theory, if you want to affect an area here, for example, you treat the most distal. So you treat the finger or close to it, and so it's interesting that shining a light here, you see the effect on the opposite end of the channel, which is an approach to treating in Chinese medicine. Treat the opposite and most far away of that channel.
Yeah, and so when we put a laser beam here, I don't know if we are stimulating nerves, and then the nerves somehow change the index finger in some manner.
Why the index finger, not the baby finger, or the thumb, or their big toe? And I'd like to see somebody show me a correlation between the nerves here and the nerve on your index finger. But yes, continue.
Maybe there is one, but maybe there's a way that we're demonstrating the independence of the channel system or the meridian system that is in some ways independent of the nervous system or other conventional physiology.
I suspect that may be true.
So it's kind of interesting. So this is a whole thing one could get into.
You may find interesting then, just coming from Bill's technique, and I was hearing him, one of the things he saw in his research, because they were curing cancer in mice, and he said intention is key, not attention. And attention takes effort. It takes effort to get clear. It takes effort to be really clear, because you have a desire, but how does that desire turn into attention? There's a clear, you can really see it, and there's an emotion that comes up and a sense of peace and belief as if you have it now. So that's when that's when people go, I attend all the time. No, wishful thinking and wanting does not communicate to the subconscious or to this field the message, because if you're coming from a desire or wanting, then you're coming from lack, and so it's just going to keep giving you that back, lack, so you'll never get it. It's this idea of intending that there's this faith that you really believe it in your cells that you have it. And I guess in the biofield, everything's happening now, so that's why it feels like with that Bill Bankson, it felt like I just knew it was going to happen. Now, I didn't put any attention on it, and I don't know why, because usually I would still keep putting my attention on things. Maybe that's why that slows down the manifestation. But I'm curious what you think of this. In the healing, what he said was, the practitioner, there's a quick intention, but he said it was more the patient, the key, that they had to be in need of healing. And if you came there and you got into heart resonance, brain coherence, whatever they call it, or you get into whatever the space is, Chinese medicine talks about as well, what's the state of the practitioner? That was in one of your papers. But the subject somehow pulls what it needs from you. So it's not so much, I'm the magic healer and I'm going to do this and that. For the most part, it's the subject pulling the healing from you. I'm going to ask him more. I'm seeing him this weekend. I'm going to ask him more really what that means and about. But it seemed like it was more about the need of the subject than the attention of the healer. What do you think of that from what you know?
Yeah, there's an aphorism which is the energy goes where it's needed.
Oh, nice.
You can put your prayers out into the universe. You can meditate. You can chant. You can contribute to the world through your thought. And where does it go? And it's going to go where it's needed. And so I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think that also it's much deeper than that. If you read esoteric healing, for instance, the options available for human beings to learn biofield healing are enormous. And we've hardly scratched the surface. And what she shows, I think, puts us out there, 100, 200, 300 years, probably.
I do think there's more than meets the eye. And I think when I look at what's going on in our world today, I think the methods, because of where humanity is and our planet is, there's an evolution, a paradigm shift and an evolution of humanity is happening. And the things that used to work, take this pill for your depression or your pain. Like, we had the opioid crisis. Now you can't take drugs to get rid of your pain. Now you have to find something else and put in a needle and, using acupuncture in a very physical way versus an energetic way. I just don't see those results as like I used to. And people are having to do their inner work. They're really having to heal these wounds, right? And when I work with people and I'm combining in my treatment acupuncture with low-level laser, and I'm doing the energy psychology work, the energy medicine work, when you heal the mind, that's when you see the greatest change in my patients. And the old physical styles, I'm not finding they're benefiting from them as much. And I'm seeing more patients come in where the biology medicine, the conventional medicine, just isn't touching it for them at all, or they're choosing not to go that route. What are your thoughts on that, because that's been my I think that there's a massive evolution, and most people think we're doomed. I don't think we are. I think there's it may get worse before it gets better, but I think there's something happening, and maybe this shit show that we're seeing in the world and politics and stuff is the catalyst for us to evolve.
I don't think we're doomed at all. It could certainly get worse. There's too many hostile solutions. There really are. I think that it is a great mystery. I think that you create, to a certain extent, your own reality from the standpoint of what you could accomplish with a patient. And you have that ability to, when a patient has an illness or an emotional problem or something that's blocking them, and they have an issue, and you can free that up, then that changes the composition of their biofield, so to speak, their meridians, their chakras, whatever it is. And then that reestablishes the homeostasis and the healthy patterning that we've been talking about, all morning long here. And I think that there's a hierarchical level. You got the physical body, you have the energy body, the biofield, then you have the emotional body, you have the mental body, and you have the soul body. All these hierarchies take place. And if you want to heal the physical body, you have to influence the etheric. But sometimes that can be overridden by the emotional body, also called the astral body, or the mental body, and so you can only access it by accessing healing on the emotional realm or the mental realm. The mental is positive to the emotional is positive to the etheric is positive polarity to the physical. So depending on where their difficulty lies, if your patient has the problem and the source of that problem is emotional, you have to deal with it from either an emotional or a mental level. If you change the mental, it'll change the emotion. That emotion will change the etheric will change the physical. It ratchets on down through the hierarchical levels of energy, so to speak. You have the capacity to interact with people on a mental or an emotional level, and probably when you put your intention on something, you're actually influencing them on a spiritual level. They attribute to you competence, integrity, belief, healing energy, etc. You have great power from that standpoint, and so that accesses people on a very high level. So it's a reality, and it can be as simple as talking to them, or whatever you're doing to them is accessing the level at which they need to do it. But I think that from the standpoint of healing energies and all that, if a patient has an issue, the healer's energy has to be stronger, or positive in polarity as in comparison to the patient. Then it can cause the effect you're talking about. So you can have that stronger energy on etheric level, emotional level, mental level, or spiritual level, and it'll start affecting the patient in some manner. I don't know if that provides a model, but I'm just validating what you're saying. But I experience you to be operating on somewhat unconsciously, but you're still influencing them on those levels. Very real. It's very real.
And what some practitioners share is they share that you often attract to you patients that are perfect for you. Like the things that you need to heal, they're coming in. I often find when they're sharing their stories and stuff, it's kind of like, well, geez, you're doing the healing with the patients, and the patients I'm attracting aren't coming in just for physical stuff. Even they think they are. Very quickly in the interview, it becomes apparent that there's other stuff going on, and they're mostly ready to do that work. And since 2014, I've been seriously doing my process work, and that's all I love to do. And it seems that's what I attract to my clinic without doing advertisement. Like, this is what I want to see. Just that's what's been coming into my practice. So, and other people share the same thing.
Look, I totally support that level of inquiry. I totally agree with that. There's nobody you know, there's nobody out there. You're seeing a reflection of yourself. As you clear your emotions, your intentions, you become, as you, you clear all your issues out, as you become realized, so to speak, then you can serve as a vehicle for clearing those people who come to you with those same issues. And as they come to you, you get to see that part of yourself which needs to be worked on, and it's an opportunity for you to therefore clear it up and then contribute that to your patient as well. But you know, when you say that you attract to yourself, it's a high level of understanding. It's extraordinary, and I think it's absolutely true.
Well, when you talk about the reflection, even to me, I've been reading a lot of James Hollis. He's into the Carl Jung psychology, and he talks all about the reflection. And then you got Byron Katie, you know, Loving What Is, and Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. All this is that your environment is a reflection of your internal world. And I don't know who said it, but nothing happens to you, things happen for you. And so when things are good going on, I'm like, okay, that's a reflection inside. And when things are bad, that's a reflection inside. So there's no more opportunity to be a victim or blame people anymore, because it's just a reflection of what, and which is motivating me to do my work, why I'm doing the 2020 conference with this theme, because what I've learned is if you want to heal the planet, you need to heal your own mind. You got to heal. You want to heal the planet, just heal your own mind. If everybody did the work to heal their mind, then problem solved. So it's not so much we got to go and change. You can't change anybody else's mind, by the way. You can only change yours. So good luck with that one. We have a picture up here. We're curious. It's photo number 18. I think it was titled Ghost Picture or something. What's this one about?
Well, that's a really interesting picture. It's so weird I didn't bring it up. If you look at that, that's a picture of a tobacco field in Georgia.
Yeah.
And you can see a ghosty-like picture of a woman standing there. You can see her white sweater she was wearing. You can see her white socks down there. Actually, she's clothed and she's there, but you can see right through her, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Woman's name was Annabelle Schmidt. She had two pictures of herself, one like that her friend took. She was totally normal, and then that one where she was totally transparent. And she brought these to me, and she said, look, I've got these pictures. These happen all the time. Please explain this to me. She's totally humble and, you know, just a person who was a photographer in Georgia. And, well, I don't have an explanation for it. In our lab at UCLA, we had hundreds of these things that would come to us, and they were fascinating. And if you look into this, you can find, for instance, in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, you can find descriptions of how a yogi can make himself invisible. You can see pictures here and there of different, like, monks or maybe lamas, and they've decided to make their face invisible. You take a picture of them. You really, really dig into this. You can find that this is not a unique phenomena, that on occasion people will take photographs and they disappear or they become transparent. And you wonder what in the hell is going on. And I don't know, it's a total paradigm shift from the standpoint of the physics of light and reflection off an object and all of that. And there's, but I don't think this is phony. I think it's quite real. And another part of our research I didn't discuss was ghost research. I used to attend seances, and I would set cameras up in the room, and they'd be synchronized to flash, and they would take pictures at the same time. And for instance, I did one seance over 18-month period of time, and I was photographing a lot of ghosts in the room, and some of them would appear, and they'd be just like that picture. They were transparent. Like, what the hell? This is extraordinary data. One time that stands out for me was the same people would come for the same seance every week. It was a Tuesday night. There's a gentleman who lived out in Hollywood, and he was late for the seance, and he showed up later, and he had a ski sweater on, and he had Levi's on, and he was so apologetic. Oh, I'm so sorry I'm late. I was terrible. All I could do was think about the group, send you guys energy. I got stuck in traffic. Well, when I went back and developed the photographs, I would take, before everybody arrived, I would take baseline pictures a half hour of the room before anybody showed up. He showed up in the baseline pictures a half hour before anybody showed up as a guy standing in the room with his ski sweater and his jeans and his shoes and everything, but he was transparent. What the hell happened? And it's like, just like that picture I showed you of that woman, Annadelle Schnipp.
Right.
He apparently set a thought of himself into the room, and we picked it up in the picture, in the cameras. It was the damnedest thing. Now, there's a myth in Norway called the myth of the Verdoger, the forerunner. And it would be like people would know when somebody was traveling to meet them, because people would see apparitions of the people weeks ahead of time. Like, oh, so-and-so is traveling. I know he's coming. I just saw his apparition. So we did a lot of ghost research. And by George, it seemed to be that on many occasions, a ghost had the physical property of reflecting physical light. If you had a red light bulb on in the ceiling and you were taking color pictures, the ghost would show up red, like he was reflecting the red light. It was the damnedest thing. And I think that we're going to enter into a phase of research, and it could be using electricity like the phantom leaf in some manner. There's another experiment done by William Tiller, and he took electrical plates, one positively charged, one negatively charged, just to the point where he almost had these electrical sparks appearing between them. And he had people think about that electrode configuration, and he would cause the sparks to appear between the electrode plates. So he was picking up sparks in the electrical discharge. It was picking up thoughts in the electrical discharge. And I think what can happen, Lorne, is that we can probably develop a technique where somebody who's dead and a ghost, they can project a thought of themselves, and we can photograph it. We're going to photograph ghosts. I know you think I'm nuts, but maybe you don't. But
I don't.
Yeah, I think we will have verification of what we call ghosts, the life after death or immortality or human survival, in the not distant future. We were going to be able to photograph people after they've passed over, and maybe even enter into, create very sensitive radio equipment. I think it's quite possible to do that. I actually do. And we can pick up the subtle thought frequencies in some manner when we understand more about the biofield.
Go into that fifth dimension, some people call it.
Yeah, and I think that, it's going to be commonplace. Oh, ho-hum, yeah, we all die and then we live, and now we know it. It's in the laboratories are showing this. I think in 50 years or so, this stuff will be about a paradigm shift. It's just one of those things. These
ghost pictures, and I'm just remembering the books, but it's kind of like you're projecting or sending your consciousness. So, that's, you're basically, it's awareness. You become nobody, no thing, and you really project your consciousness. And in the books, you get into conspiracy theories, but they talk about the United States, how they had people that had this talent, and during war times, they would go and find out schematics of certain places outside that, and then only years later, when they went there, it was very accurate. So these people could project themselves to other places around the planet and give them everything that they needed to know, and it was used in wartime.
Clairvoyance, yeah. I had a friend of mine who was a psychic, and she was employed by a wine company in Northern California, and they were having trouble with their wine manufacturing. So the whole batches were turning out sour or something, and so they paid her, and there's a leak in this faucet, in this valve. Go there, find it. It's leaking and it's causing this problem. There it is. And she was getting paid for this work, and you got to be good to do that. But there's examples of that.
So I'm open-minded, and so there's some people that refuse to believe, or they just believe no matter what, right? Gullible, and I like healthy skeptics, which I know you are as well, and myself. Whereas I'm open to it. It's interesting, and then just find a way to confirm it, right? Either through my own experience, or let's show science how we can reaffirm that this is really happening. And so, thanks again for chatting with me. Again, think about how many years ago you and I sat down. This was kind of like just how things happen, though, right? But neither of us, we were pretty mellow about it, right? Hey, let's do this, and we tried, and it didn't happen, and then here we are today. But again, it's happening, and it's happening at the right time, I guess, huh?
It's got to be the right time, right?
And I know I didn't stress about it. You didn't get stressed. There was nobody, you didn't do it. We just, let's do this. We kept on setting dates, trying, and just didn't happen. We keep seeing each other. We got to talk every time and then here it is today. It's nice when that happens. So, thanks for making the time and for sharing. We'll do some more of this. This is really interesting and exciting. And again, when we decided to get on and talk, it was, can we use science to demystify New Age, the field, and Chinese medicine, acupuncture, and channels. So I love where this is going, and I love the work that you're contributing to the field. This is quite interesting. And you said earlier, you have to look at it with different eyes to see it differently. And the skeptics and a lot of people are looking at it from biology, which hasn't gone through the revolution. So of course they can't see what's in front of their eyes because they're looking at a model that is incomplete. And by going into a different box, you were able to see things that were always there, but you just weren't able to see because you weren't looking at it with the right lens.
Amen.
Amen. John, thank you very much. For listeners, if you're interested, John's website is pantheonresearch.com. He sells all kinds of cool little devices, one of them being the Pantheon electrical acupuncture machine, which he shared is the only one that's FDA approved. We use that at AcuBalance, acubalance.ca. So do check out his website. If you're looking for more information on how acupuncture, Chinese medicine works as a practitioner and to bring it into your practice, I would check out Michael Corradino's work on neuropuncture courses. He talks a lot about electrical acupuncture. Also, Pony Chiang, his is neuromarine acupuncture. Don Lee on electrical acupuncture, so that will be of interest. And we'll do some more of these interviews. If you like this, you may enjoy Jill Blakeway's interview I did on energy medicine, Bill Bankston as well, where he talks about it's not energy, but it's more about information. He talks about the placebo effect, and we'll hopefully have more of these for you guys, because I think this is super interesting. And as you said, it's about to explode. You know what? If Avengers are doing it in their movies and the Avatar, I think it's already exploded. If my kids think of quantum physics as just normal, then I think it's just the older people like myself that are slowly coming along. But the younger generation are like, yeah, quantum physics, they get it. No space, no time. It makes sense to them. So,
Norm, you look young to me. Lorne, you look young to me. So. You're not the older.
All relative. That's the yin yang theory, my friend. It's all relative. To my kids, I'm old. To you, I guess I'm young, right? So I'll take that.
Anyway, awesome.
John, I really enjoyed chatting with you today. Thank you very much. Again, you guys can check out John's website at pantheonresearch.com. Check out healthyseminars.com, and also my clinic. If you're looking for acupuncture and energy medicine, then I do that, and that's at acubalance.ca. Thank you, guys.